Ranking Member Askins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both the witnesses for their testimony and for appearing with us today. It seems to me that a lot of your testimony has been about the problem of prosecutorial discretion and the traditional tug of war between investigators who characteristically want to charge as many offenses as they've come across and prosecutors who are more attuned to the rigors of the courtroom and the complexity of forensic evidence. And I admit, as a former state assistant attorney general, I see it more from the prosecutor's standpoint than the investigator's standpoint. But Mr. Shapley, would you concede that there are lots of crimes that are identified by investigators that are not actually charged by prosecutors routinely? I'll give you an example. In the recent prosecution, the recent indictment of Donald Trump for retaining government documents that he unlawfully took, according to the indictment, he was charged only with possessing those documents that were recovered after the August 2022 search warrant, but he had hundreds of documents that were recovered before that, 15 boxes that were recovered in January and then after the grand jury subpoena in June. But the prosecutors decided not to charge any of those as offenses. They said they were going to take the most egregious offenses and charge those. Is that unfamiliar to you, that kind of decision by a prosecutor?
So I can't speak to anything related to the Trump investigation, but the issue here with this case is that it wasn't just investigators that agreed with these charges. In Exhibit 2 in my testimony, it clearly shows a prosecution recommendation report where it says right in the document that the Assistant United States Attorneys and Department of Justice Tax Division agreed with those recommended charges, and then again, and as Special Agent Ziegler alluded to, in late 2022.
And they were recommended to whom?
To Department of Justice. So the prosecution recommendation report is referred to the Department of Justice Tax Division for approval, discretion, or declination.
Right, but then it all went to the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, right?
So that's not entirely accurate because, Department of Justice Tax Division up through March 16th of 2023 had not yet approved, provided discretion, or declined charges. So U.S. Attorney Weiss had no authority to charge any of those charges without the Department of Justice Tax Division's approval beforehand.
And I'd like to say something about this real quick. So
well, let me come back to you because I only have a limited amount of time and I've got questions for you. But in fact, Mr. Ziegler, you say that Hunter Biden's unpaid taxes were around $2 million, and he's now paid those back taxes, as I understand it, and he's been criminally charged for not paying taxes. Will you just explain how people can be charged for not paying taxes even after they've made amends and gone forward to pay them?
So under the statute, when someone fails to timely pay their taxes, usually due April 15th, once that date occurs, they have a known tax liability and they fail to pay it, the crime has already been committed. The fact that they paid the taxes after, that's a mitigating factor that the judge can use their discretion at sentencing. But I would like to make one reference that this does not include the over $100,000 in additional tax due and owing that was not charged related.
No, you made yourself clear you thought there were additional charges that were laid on the table and not pursued by U.S. Attorney Weiss, the Trump appointee. But Mr. Shapley, you testified that the critical moment in your decision to blow the whistle in the Hunter Biden investigation was the October 7th meeting 2022 that you had with U.S. Attorney David Weiss. And up until that point, you say you were willing to chalk up the differences with prosecutors to the typical, quote, investigator versus prosecutor type thing, which is what I think this is all about. But you say on page 28 of your transcript, if I wasn't in the October 7th meeting, my red line might not have been crossed, and I think you reaffirmed that today. Now, as I understand it, what crossed your red line is that in that meeting, you understood Mr. Weiss to be saying that he did not have the authority to bring charges in D.C. or California without the approval of the U.S. attorneys for those districts. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. But in a letter that he sent to Chairman Jordan in June, U.S. Attorney Weiss stated, and I quote, "I have been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges. He went on to explain that in considering charges in districts outside Delaware, usual DOJ practice would be, quote, to contact the U.S. Attorney's Office for the district in question and determine whether it wants to partner on the case. Now, if that office declined, he would request and be granted authority to bring the charge himself under, quote, special attorney status from the Attorney General pursuant to 28 U.S.C. Section 515. Now, to try to clear this up, Mr. Shapley, let's go back to March 2022, when, as you explained on page 153 of the transcript, the U.S. Attorney for D.C. declined to partner with Mr. Weiss to bring the 2014 and 2015 charges in D.C. After that decision by the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Mr. Weiss continued to discuss those charges with all of you. In fact, Mr. Ziegler, on page 39 of your transcript, you described how in September 2022, you had a meeting in which U.S. Attorney Weiss expressed some concerns about those charges, including that in 2015, Hunter Biden was in the throes of his drug addiction after the death of his brother. And in that meeting, Mr. Weiss tells you, and I quote, "I'm still weighing it." Now, Mr. Ziegler, in September 2022, Mr. Weiss was telling you that he was the one weighing whether to bring the 2014 and 2015 charges. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Now, coming back to the October 7th, 2022 meeting, Mr. Shapley, according to you on page 155, Mr. Weiss said that, quote, he decided not to charge 2014 and 2015. It seems to me this October 7th, 2022 meeting, which you've described as a red line, is just a misunderstanding. That after the U.S. Attorney in D.C. declined to partner on the 14 and 15 charges, Mr. Weiss took a good hard look at those charges himself and ultimately decided not to charge them and therefore not to seek this special attorney status. He may have been right about that. He may have been wrong, as you guys make your case for, but it was his decision. Isn't that right, Mr. Shapley?
No, that's not supported by the facts.
Really? Well, which facts is it not supported by?
His own admissions in the October 7th, 2022 meeting that I documented contemporaneously, and the only piece of...
But he contradicts what you're saying. Do you agree that? He doesn't agree with what you're saying about that meeting. Now, I wasn't at that October 7th, 2022 meeting, but while what was said at the meeting over 2.5 years ago may be a little ambiguous or unclear today, Mr. Weiss's letter to Chairman Jordan could not be more clear. He had, quote, ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file the charges. So if there's any ambiguity, it's got to go to U.S. Attorney Weiss, Donald Trump's hand-picked U.S. Attorney for Delaware. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back and now recognize Chairman Smith.
Can I say something real quick on that? I have two things that I wanted to bring up. So there are a lot of different tax cases out there that include misdemeanors and felonies, and there's a lot of reasons why we charge the felony, we might charge the misdemeanor. But I want to be clear on this, that when you have a felony charge with a misdemeanor, that you have to charge the felony. And in this case, they did not charge that felony. And then there's one more point to this. We had a meeting with all four assigned prosecutors.
When you say you have to charge the felony, that is a Department of Justice rule, you're saying?
That is in their manual, that you have to charge the felony in order to avoid inequitable treatment of taxpayers.
No, but you're saying whether or not the evidence supports it?
That is a part of that is in that analysis is whether the evidence, but that goes back to the point of that if the certain deductions that were taken on the tax return, that's for you guys to decide whether the felony was there or not. But the point is that we're bringing...
That's for the U.S. Attorney to decide. And I'm afraid we're not going to be able to investigate every tax case in America.
Gentleman's time's expired. Now, Chair now recognizes Mr. Smith from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr.